Hello and welcome to the first and only episode of Poetry is Not Actually That Bad. My name is Anna Swanson, and today our topic is the poetry of Walt Whitman. Born in 1819, Whitman grew up to become one of the most famous poets in American history. After he first published Leaves of Grass, Ralph Waldo Emerson sent him a letter saying, "I greet you at the beginning of a great career." And what a great career it was. Whitman only wrote one book of poetry in his entire life. Instead of creating new compilations whenever he had a new poem, he would create new editions of his classic anthology, Leaves of Grass. The collection contained only 12 poems when first published in 1855, but by the time of his death in 1892, the book had amassed nearly 400 poems. Whitman left school around the age of 11, where he began to learn the art of printing. From there, he fell in love with literature and was especially admiring of Shakespeare, Dante, and Emerson. Whitman spent a few years as a teacher before eventually turning to journalism, where he published a weekly newspaper in Long Island. He would later hold editorial positions at seven different newspapers, including one in New Orleans. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote an essay titled "The Poet," based on a lecture he gave that was witnessed by Whitman. He called for a poet who recognized the beauty of nature and who would stand as a representative for the common man. It is amazing to think about what might have happened if Whitman had not gone to the lecture. What would our current literature be like without the influence of Walt Whitman? Emerson said that this poet should write a thought so passionate and alive that, like the spirit of a plant or an animal, it has an architecture of its own and adorns nature with a new thing. He also discusses the lack of poets writing about America. In 1855, Whitman answered all his dreams. Seriously, everything Emerson wants in a poet can be found in the works of Whitman. Leaves of Grass is written entirely in free verse, a new style of poetry that doesn't follow any rhyme scheme or formula. Instead, Whitman uses his words as he saw fit to create more meaning and nuance in his work. That being said, there are still patterns to be found in Whitman's writings. Who Learns My Lessons Complete, one of the 12 original poems in Leaves of Grass, contains examples of parallel structure, boss and journeyman and apprentice, churchman and atheist, the stupid and the wise thinker, parents and offspring, merchant and clerk and porter and customer, editor, author, artist, and schoolboy. Draw nigh and commence, it is no lesson. It lets down the bars to a good lesson, and that to another, and every one to another still. The great laws take and effuse without argument. I am of the same style, for I am their friend. I love them quits and quits. I do not halt and make salams. I lie abstracted and hear beautiful tales of things and the reasons of things. They are so beautiful I nudge myself to listen. I cannot say to any person what I hear. I cannot say it to myself. It is very wonderful. It is no small matter, this round and delicious globe, moving so exactly in its orbit, forever and ever, without one jolt or the untruth of a single second. I do not think it was made in 6 days, nor in 10,000 years, nor 10 decillions of years, nor planned and built like one thing after another, as an architect plans and builds a house. I do not think 70 years is the time of a man or woman, nor that 70 millions of years is the time of a man or a woman, nor that years will ever stop the existence of me or anyone else. It is wonderful that I should be immortal, as everyone is immortal. I know it is wonderful, but my eyesight is equally wonderful. And how I was conceived in my mother's womb is equally wonderful. And how I was not palpable once, but am now, and was born on the last day of May, 1819, and passed from a babe in the creeping trance of 3 summers and winters to articulate and walk, are all equally wonderful. And that I grew 6 feet high, and that I have become a man of 36 years old in 1855, and that I am here anyhow, are all equally wonderful. And that my soul embraces you this hour, and we affect each other without ever seeing each other, and never perhaps to see each other, is every bit as wonderful. And that I can think such things as these is just as wonderful. And that I can remember you, and you think them, and know them to be true, is just as wonderful. And that the moon spins round the earth, and on with the earth, is equally wonderful. And that they balance themselves with the sun and stars, is equally wonderful. Come, I shall like to hear you tell me what there is in yourself that is not just as wonderful. And I should like to hear the name of anything between Sunday morning and Saturday night that is not just as wonderful. Every person listed in the first few lines of the poem is a possible answer to the rhetorical question asked in the title, Who Learns My Lessons Complete? The parallel structure highlights the contradictions between the roles these people play, and also just the variety of people Whitman wanted to reach, as befits the democratic poet he was. I see the poem as a bit of a conclusion to the original Leaves of Grass. Whitman welcomes the reader, and by extension the world, to think about the lessons he has tried to teach them. However, it becomes evident that there is no lesson complete. Instead, it lets down the bars to a good lesson, and that to another, and every one to another still. Life is a never-ending cycle of questioning and learning. It speaks to Whitman's poetic vision. Every person has their own path, and each should be celebrated for its individuality. What I love about this poem especially is the tone used by Whitman. It is nostalgic and comforting, and makes me smile. He uses words such as beautiful, wonderful, embraces, and delicious to create a sense of familiarity, but also deep understanding in the reader. Whitman includes aspects of nature in the poem that enhance the reader's understanding of how important the way they view the world is. But he also includes anecdotes about himself that show just how personal it is too, such as in lines 21 to 22. Whitman uses repetition when starting and ending lines 21 to 27. This helps the reader identify the true meaning behind Whitman's writings. And I think that I can think such thoughts as these is just as wonderful, and that I can remind you and you think them and know them to be true is just as wonderful, and that the moon spins round the earth and on with the earth is equally wonderful, and that they balance themselves with the sun and stars is equally wonderful. Every time I read the word wonderful, all I can do is smile with contentment. Whitman wants the reader to see just how important every little aspect of life is. There's no such thing as insignificant. A common man himself, Whitman believed in creating poetry that could be understood by all, and that each person who heard his word could relate to. This aligns with his poetic vision of individual importance. Whitman ends the poem Who Learns My Lessons Complete with the line, and I should like to hear the name of anything between Sunday morning and Saturday night that is not just as wonderful, further emphasizing the idea that every moment of life has some aspect that makes it wonderful, even if it is just the fact that you are alive. The theme of the importance of small things can also be found in another poem from the original Leaves of Grass. There Was a Child Went Forth. Instead of discussing how each little moment is wonderful, it focuses on how every small childhood interaction shapes the person you eventually become. There was a child went forth every day, and the first object he looked upon and received with wonder or pity or love or dread, that object he became. And that object became part of him, for the day or for a certain part of the day, or for many years, or stretching cycles of years. Again, Whitman stresses the individuality of each person and the value their experiences have. This poem also provides another example of parallel structure and repetition, this time in the form of an aphra. The majority of the lines in the first 3 stanzas begin with the word and, creating a list of all the physical objects the child internalizes. Whitman then shifts to starting each line with the word the. Though the words are simple, the change highlights a shift in the child as well. The aspects of life the child absorbs have become more abstract and harsher. It is no longer the early lilacs, the apple trees, or the old drunkard staggering home that influence the child. Now it is the yearning and swelling heart, and the doubts of daytime and the doubts of nighttime that become part of who the child is as he grows. The change in starting word also shows the child's progression through time. Another thing to be noted in this poem is Whitman's proclivity toward lists. Though evident in the previous poem I discussed, it is even more so here. In Who Learns My Lessons Complete, Whitman lists things he thinks are wonderful. And in this poem, There Was a Child Went Forth, he lists things that influence who the child will become and the characteristics of those things. The father, strong, self-sufficient, manly, mean, angered, unjust. Lists keep appearing in Whitman's poems. In addition to helping him structure his poetry, I think they allow him to share his poetic vision of democracy and individuality. He offers many examples, hoping the reader is able to relate to at least one of them. He is addressing as many people as he can, using examples of family and nature that are common throughout class and race. I mentioned earlier that Whitman is everything Emerson was looking for in a poet. I talked about his standing for the common man, appreciation of nature and human nature, and his unique style that contradicts the European standard of the time. But I haven't yet talked about his portrayal of America. One of the best examples with this, and there are many, can be found in Whitman's poem, I Hear America Singing. Another list, this one about the harmony created in America by people of all different backgrounds. Whitman uses the poem to celebrate America as a whole. Each line mentions one or more people by their profession singing. For example, the shoemaker singing as he sits on his bench, the hatter singing as he stands. And there is something about the simple 11-line poem that captures the heart of what Whitman believed America should be. He sees it as each person doing their own part, but working together as a whole to make something happen. I hear America singing the varied carols I hear. It isn't just one person singing by themselves, but everybody singing in harmony. This poem also exemplifies Whitman's democratic ideals. No man is better than another, as each is doing their part. Whitman's poems grew increasingly broad during the Civil War, as he became a speaker for the nation as a whole. His poetic vision shifted from personal individuality to national unity. Though Emerson greeted Whitman at what he called the start of a great career, critics did not take kindly to Walt Whitman's poetry. Many didn't know what to make of his style of writing that abandoned all known poetic forms. They also looked down on his presentation as a common rough man. Above all, they were put off by the sexual subject matter of some of his poems. Upon publishing Leaves of Grass for the first time, he was fired from the Department of the Interior as they didn't want to be associated with him. Later editions of his book included a section titled Children of Adam, that contains poems detailing physical love between a man and a woman and procreation. Another titled Calamus, that consists of poems about what Walt Whitman referred to as manly love. I Sing the Body Electric appeared in the first edition of Leaves of Grass, and was later moved to the Children of Adam section. The poem celebrates the beauty of both the male and female forms, as well as separating the idea of body and soul. Contrary to Christian belief, Whitman believes that body that the body does not corrupt the soul. Was it dreamed whether those who corrupted their own bodies could conceal themselves, and whether those who defiled the living were as bad as they who defiled the dead? Whitman's list structure returns in this poem as he catalogues the different parts of the human body and celebrates the uniqueness of it all. He makes sure to express his opinion that male and female bodies are equal throughout the poem. Whitman's views were decidedly unpopular at the time, but they are definitely interesting to read about in the present day. Walt Whitman brought something new and exciting to the table with his poems. Though he was banned from obscenity one minute, then hailed as the great American poet the next, his work has held up, and many parts are still relevant today. I think Whitman would be proud that his words continue to reach us and inspire us to celebrate ourselves as human beings, as male or female, and as Americans. That concludes our time for today. Thank you for listening to the one and only episode of Poetry is Not Actually That Bad. I'm Anna Swanson, and I will see you never.